You recall that in our study session 2, we discussed the many types and functions of the legislature as a structure of the government. Today, we are going to continue on the study, the structure and the organization of government too, with what we call the executive. At the end of today's lecture, learners will be acquainted with the knowledge that will be sufficient to explain what is meant by the executive and discuss the various types of executive. 2. Discuss the functions of the executive arms of the government. And 3. Explain the specific functions of the executive. Now, the meaning and types of executive. What do we mean by executive? The executive refers to the arm or organs of government that enforces the laws and executes policy. It is the institution of the state that is often known as the government. The executive is perhaps the most active of the institutions of the state. Types of executive. There are 3 basic types of executive. The first is the single executive system, otherwise known as the monocephalous executive system. This has power in one person. The monocephalous executive system vested powers in one person called the president, who is elected directly or indirectly by the electorate. 2. We have the dual executive system, also known as the bicephalous executive system. There is fusion of powers among the organs of the government. In this type of system, we say there is what? Fusion of power among the organs of what? Of the government. There are 2 leaders. One is the head of state, who performs ceremonial functions, while the other leader is the head of the government, who performs executive functions. The third one is collegiate executive system. It is not a popular type of executive. A number of people form a council which rotates each chairman and leadership of the council among its members. Let's look at the general functions of the executive. 1. It enforces laws and implement policies for the purpose of maintaining law and order and meeting the developmental aspirations of the state. Where the executive is elected, it serves as the agent of the people. It controls the public service, which provides administration not only for the executive but also the legislature and the judiciary. 4. It checks the legislature and the judiciary. 5. The executive controls the finances of the state. 6. The executive is the instrument of coercion, and it used to control also the executive. As the state instrument of coercion are under the control of what? The executive. The 7th one is the executive conducts international relations on behalf of the state. In addition, the executive maintains strategic economic institutions of the state, like the central bank, public enterprises, structures for economic reconstructing, institutions for registration of companies, and so forth. Finally, the executive participates in lawmaking by introducing bills to the legislature. Let's also look at the specific functions of the executive. The specific functions can be classified into 3 categories. These are the legislative functions, the administrative function, and the judicial functions of the executive. Let's look at the legislative functions of the executive. The executive recommends measures for consideration by the legislature. It initiates bills and defends such bills in parliament, and it exercises the powers of veto. 2. The executive also has the powers of delegated legislation. Then the administrative functions. The administrative functions of the executive include: 1. It directs and supervises the executions of law. The executive has some military power. These include the supreme command of the army, navy, and air force. And in some cases, the powers to declare war is also vested in the executive. Finally, the executive has the power to exercise diplomatic powers. Then the judicial functions of the executive. The judicial functions of the executive. The power to grant pardon to offenders, prerogative of mercy, is vested on the executive. 2. The executive has power to exercise quasi-judicial function by trying certain disputes between government and official or private citizens. And 3rd, institution of commission of inquiry. Now, let's quickly look at the synopsis of the study session of 3. We discuss 1. The 3 types of executive. We said single, dual, and the collegiate. 2. The general functions of the executive are 1. It enforces law and implements policies for the purpose of maintaining law and order and meeting the developmental aspirations of the state. 2. We said the executive has, as elected body of the people, serve as the agent of the people. We also discussed its power to control the public service, which provide public administration not only for the executive but also the legislature and the judiciary. Also, we talk about its power to check the legislature and the judiciary. Later, we discuss that the executive is vested with the controls of the judiciary specifically. And finally, we said that it has the specific function, or otherwise, the specific functions of the executive cut across the legislature, or otherwise, the legislative, the administrative, and the judicial power. Thank you for listening.